What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I'm Thrift Barringer alongside my partner in crime, Richard Holdridge, and we got another great show of high school football talking Auburn, Georgia, and Alabama, and the college ranks, and then plus hitting on the Atlanta Falcons and some NFL. This is your premier show for all things sports around Georgia and Alabama. We're not going to touch on the Major League Baseball playoffs. We don't want to bring bad luck to any of our beloved Bravos. So we're not going to say anything right now, and we are just going to keep it to football only on this show. And hopefully we'll see another Braves championship here this postseason. But, Richard, got a lot we're going to be getting into. We had a fun week last week. We had a doubleheader that we did, a lot of great games around the area, and then we got an even bigger slate of games this week. I'm excited to talk about those.
Well, that was a great slate of high school games last week. We had fantastic finishes, teams that went into overtime, big region games, and we had just an absolutely extraordinary opportunity calling it two incredible games. I got to say, Thrift, you had a very good, very important game, and that game was dominated by Harris County, and they are ranked number 18 in 5A. I called the Creekside or the Christian Academy game against Calvary Christian, and a big shout out to Justin Brown making his Georgia Alabama Sports Live debut. We had Michael Long Jr. the week before. We're starting to get some broadcasters into our fold. Rick Beach has done a couple of games now. I mean, it's really incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. I'm glad these guys want to be a part of our team. And you mentioned it. We had a fun weekend last weekend. But I want to start first on Monday. I had a call about a month and a half ago from my good friend David Spitzmiller, longtime coach at Brookstone, Calvary, and at Pacelli. And he asked, would I be interested in doing a live stream of a golf classic the CSU men's basketball program was putting on to raise money for scholarships, to help get kids there at the school, to help with coaches and their staffing, equipment. There's a bunch of needs when you're running a Division II high-level basketball program like Coach Moore is doing. So I said yes, and thank you to our sponsors that help make the live stream possible. Thank you to Missy Jones. Thank you to Mo Scarborough, FCA, and Jonathan Carastory. Thank you so much for West Central FCA, Ashley Furniture Home Store, Barringer Construction, Pacelli Vikings, and the Pacelli Vikings Sports. Thank you to Roger Beck for the love that you have shown us, and the Campus Academy are some to name a few. We appreciate the love that you gave us this Monday, but we interviewed pretty much every player that is on the CSU roster. Got a little bit of a background history with them, learned where they're from, their position, how their play style, how they play like. And then we also interviewed a couple of coaches, Coach Moore, David, and then a couple of sponsors and key people like David Spitzmiller. So it was just a day of promoting CSU basketball. We talked about all the history of it, with Herbert Green starting it in the 80s, to Doug Branson taking over in the 2000s, to now Coach Moore in his 14th season. I had a lot of fun. So thank you so much. You can see all those interviews and that live stream on our Facebook page. And we will have a kind of like a highlight of the day put up here momentarily. And it'll be on our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook page. Richard, any thoughts before we get started about the live stream on Monday?
It truly was a great event. And if you're a golf fan, it really was an opportunity just to go on the golf course and for a good cause. And I had a great time with you, Thrift, just interviewing the Columbus State basketball players, just getting a feel for the upcoming season, which is about a month away. And I know that I'm excited to cover Columbus State basketball here on this show.
Yeah, I am too. And Scott Miller wasn't there, but he'll be an integral part of our show. And we'll be doing a lot of things with CSU athletics, not just the men's basketball program. Jay Sparks, I did an interview with him, Coach Moore. They know what we're doing here, and we want to give them exposure. I mean, they are D2 schools, so it's not like they don't get love around Columbus, but we want to be a helpful part of getting the name out there. And because Columbus State is a premier, one of the best Division II schools in America, not just in the South, not just in the state of Georgia, in America. And we have one of the top nursing programs, business programs. I was a graduate there, and I always knew about Coach Moore's program. There was a place I really wanted to play coming out of high school before I went to the junior college route. So I like what is happening over there. And I think this is Coach Moore's deepest team, and he's won multiple Peach Belt Conference championships. And this is going to be another year where they're going to be deep, loaded, and they got guys who are coming from the D1 level. So they're going to be competitive without, it don't matter who they play. So excited about Columbus State University for sure. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of the games. We talked on high school game day. By the way, we were at Calvary for their homecoming, and we can start there, Richard. They played against Creekside Christian. Thank you to Steve Smith. Thank you to Manuel Brunson, the head football coach. He came on and did an interview with us, Steve Smith, and then our guest picker, my good friend Jonathan Gordon, who's the head basketball coach there at Calvary. And it was a showing of all showings for Calvary. They were up by 30 at the end of the first quarter. They just dominated Creekside in every form or fashion. They were pretty much the better team in every aspect of the game, is what you told me, Richard. Great job by you. Thank you to Justin Brown, who filled in and was doing the color alongside your play-by-play. But give me some of your key thoughts after seeing that game, and Calvary now going to 4-3 on the season.
Well, Coach Emmanuel Brunson said on high school game day that they wanted to dominate in every aspect of the game: offense, defense, special teams. And they did just that. Luke Scoggins, which happens to be the grandson of WRBL news anchor Phil Scoggins, he had 2 touchdowns in the game. He ran a kickoff return back for a touchdown, and that just got the party started. DeAndre Hurd with 4 touchdowns. You had Nate Osborne start the first half. Luke Zavak started the second half, and they started getting a feel for how to run the offense. But their defense was so dominant and smothering. Creekside could not get anything going. If they had gaps, that defense was there to the ball. They have speed, and their linebackers can run sideline to sideline. And there was really only one big play, but not once did I see Creekside Christian even get past the 40. They might have been in Calvary's territory maybe once, but it was at the 40, and they had to punt it away. Just an absolute dominating game by Calvary Christian.
It was, and I'm glad that now they're 4-3. Got a big game coming up at the Kings Academy. That's a team that's 3-2 themselves, and we're excited. We'll talk about that in a little bit, Richard. You don't have to put up the graphic, but I like this Calvary getting a dominant win on homecoming night, and thank you for the hospitality from Steve Smith. We'll be back there in 2 weeks for senior night, October the 20th. The game I was at was Northside and Harris County. Northside went 9-1 last year, Richard. Won the Region 3 5A championship. Won their first round playoff. Lost in the second round to back. How many times did that team win state championship in a row?
Oh, Warner Robins won 2 straight state championships. They were trying to go for the 3-peat, but they eventually lost to Ware County in the 5A championship last year.
Well, made it again for 3 straight seasons. So they got I think the short end of the stick when it comes to seeding last year, because I thought that team was easily a quarterfinal team and winning 2 home playoff games. But Northside and Caden Clay, they still have a lot of talent. They lost to Sumter, lost to LaGrange, but this was their first region game, still everything in front of them. And as good as Caden Clay is, as good as Jay Jackson, Kingston Rivers, and their receiving core, they didn't have a lot of time to throw because of the defensive line led by Bishop Adams and the Harris County Tigers. They just ran through Northside. And one possession, when it was 27-7, Northside was trying to, actually it may have been 20-7, and Northside was trying to score to make it a single-digit game. Harris County had 3 straight sacks, and they had to go for it on 4th and 40 because the game was pretty much over with. Harris County gets the ball and then goes and puts it in to make it 27-7. But Matei Yeoman was incredible. Miguel Sevilla, he was great. Rand Ogletree, we talk about, guys that play both ways. Camden White of Glenwood. Another one, Rand Ogletree. He plays in the secondary for Harris County. He had an interception. He almost had a return for a touchdown, and then he had a receiving touchdown. This guy was great, but the player of the game for sure was Levi Watson. And it wasn't the way you would think Levi Watson will win a game with his with his arm. He did it with his legs. He had over 100 yards rushing in that first half. And Harris County, this is how they play. All right. They like dominating both lines of scrimmage. They like dominating the time of possession, having the ball majority of the half, where Harris County can't wear down their defense. I mean, Northside can't wear down their defense. Harris County can. And they dominated from start to finish. This was no doubt in my mind. I know it was close at halftime, but I like what Tommy Watson has. This is one of probably his best team since becoming head coach at Harris County and becoming a head coach in general. And now they're 6-1, and they're atop the Region 3 with Northgate, who blew out McIntosh 56-27. So that game in 2 weeks, if Northgate beats Northside, that game could be for a region championship. Harris County's got a bye this week, but the Tigers keep dominating and rolling, and they have found their groove. They found their identity. Levi Watson's coming into his own as a leader for that team. I like this Tigers team. I like them so much they may go 9-1 and make it to the quarterfinals. Maybe even, who knows how seeding works, a semifinal appearance. And nobody thought that for a team that went 2-8 last year.
6 straight wins for the Harris County Tigers. This was the biggest game at Kinnett Stadium this season, in my opinion. Going up against Northside, you knew that the fan bases were both going to represent. I had the privilege of watching the game that you and Rick Beach called, and it was great. You guys did a great job. That's really just the luxury of having a doubleheader on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. And that game was 14-7 going into the fourth quarter. I thought that it was a defensive battle between both games, but Harris County just continued to control the football with the time of possession, and their defense stepped up in a big way. A huge win for the Harris County Tigers.
Another Tigers team that got a big win. And again, shout out to Rick Beach for being there, and just a guy that is a true professional, and I appreciate him being a part of our team. Another Tigers team that got a must-needed win is that Carver Tigers, who beat the team that beat them last year in the quarterfinals 28-14. I know Carver's got 3 losses, but they're against teams that are not in their region and have Northeast Macon. That is a 2A school, all right? They're in the same region as Spencer. Then Brookwood, that's a 7A school, all right? And then they lost to Hateville Charter, who's a 4A school. Carver is 3A. They won't face any of those teams in the championship, and they still have everything in front of them. I think they're going to blow this region out the water. Thomasville was the only team that I thought was going to give them a run for their money. Carver, big win. Great job by Matthew Mungan. Great job by Coach Coffey coming in and getting a must-needed win to go to now. I think this is 4-3 on the season. They were 2-3 at one point. Back-to-back wins over Columbus and Thomasville. I think Carver's going to end up winning out now, and I like the way this team is playing after the bye week.
Carver defeated the team that defeated them 14-13 last year down in Thomasville. Thomasville won the region last year, resulting in the Carver Tigers getting a number 2 seed. Everything is in front of the Carver Tigers, 2-0 in the region. If you look at their remaining schedule, still got to play Crisp County. That's a tough game. They got to play Doherty. They got to play Monroe. And I think that the Carver Tigers could run the table and win this region, because a Pierre Coffey coach team is only going to get better. This is a young team, but they know how to develop their players. I like what DeAndre Childs does as the running back. Kobe Caslin. Deontay Childs, Kobe Caslin, just great athletes that know how to get the job done and get the W.
Yeah, they do. And I like a team that had a lot of everything that happened in the Spencer game, and then losing games that came down the wire and getting stopped at the goal line. A team that's not going to quit. Honestly, think it's going to make them stronger. And again, do not be surprised if Carver makes another deep playoff run. I know a lot of people wrote them off when they were 2-3. I didn't, and I think Carver is going to be just fine. Pacelli versus Brookstone. They call it the Brucelli game. They got a Brucelli jug. Brookstone dominated from, I would say, 2010 to 2020, heck, even further than that. They pretty much had their imprint. Implant. I mean, the word, we're going to keep this G rated, but that's not the word you should be using. Imprint is what I meant on this rivalry. They dominated it for a long long period of time. But the last 3 regular season games, 32-0. Last year's 29-21 game that was closer than many people thought. And then this year in overtime, plus last year's semifinal game. That's back-to-back times these two teams have faced off at Diamond Field that have come down to overtime. And Pacelli gets a huge win over Brookstone. Brookstone, that's their 4th loss now on the season. They're 2-4. But I think that if you look at the rest of their schedule, it looks weak. They're going to probably finish up 6-4. We're going to be calling a couple of games. They'll be 6-4, and they'll be on the road at Stratford, probably a game they'll have to face off against. Guess what? They beat Stratford already on the road this year. I like Brookstone to still make a run in the playoffs, even though they got 3-4 losses now on the season. But Pacelli, when it counts for rivalry games, you throw records out. Look what happened with Georgia and Auburn. Same thing that's happening with this Pacelli Brookstone. By the way, we talked about this. This was Brookstone's state championship in their mind. Every one of them said their number one goal was to beat Pacelli this year. And I thought they had a great game plan. Coach Gillespie did a great job with this team. They kept it close. They had a chance of winning the game. They were driving down by 3, ended up kicking a field goal to tie it, and ended up losing in overtime by 7. But again, great win by Coach Dwight Jones and his staff to overcome some silly turnovers and to win another big rivalry game. That makes them 6-1. They won 6 straight, just like Harris County. And after their loss against Glenwood, and Pacelli looks like they're in the driver's seat to win another 4A state championship in the GIAA.
The Brucelli Jug stays at the campus of Pacelli, and this could be another rematch in the GIAA playoffs because these two teams met in the semifinals last year. I had the privilege of watching this game on Viking Live as Dave Plata and DJ Jones did a great job calling the game. It was 17-14, a kick field goal. It goes into overtime. Pacelli gets the touchdown in overtime, and they get the big defensive stop because Brookstone has an opportunity to tie it up in that overtime because each team gets a possession, but Pacelli was able to get the big 4th down stop, and they celebrated. What a way to end a rivalry game right there on Diamond Field. And congratulations to the Pacelli Vikings for holding on to the Brucelli Jug at least one more season. I know Brookstone they got Pacelli penciled in for 2024 because I know that they want that Brucelli Jug so bad.
And heck, I know it won't be for the Jug because that's only regular season games, but they could be facing off for a much bigger prize at the end of this season, maybe in the playoffs like we saw last year. So Brookstone, keep your head up. You still got a lot to play for. Big win for Coach Jones, and shout out to Corey Black. All right, we'll touch on a few more games before we start previewing this week. Glenwood taking on Monroe. I mean, they dominated Monroe every facet of the game. Another dominant performance, kind of like what we saw with Calvary. They won 48-13. When hearing from Coach Nelson at the Glenwood Coaches Show, this was a road win. It was going to be tough in the middle of nowhere. Monroe, they got some big country boys that can really dominate line the scrimmage if you allow them to, but Glenwood took care of business. Dallas Crow was sensational. Camden White and Glenwood 7-0 on the season in the driver's seat for the AISA as the number 1 team and looking like I hope, eventual state champions for 2023. Another big win for Glenwood.
And with 3 games remaining, 2 more region games, and if they win Friday, they're going to win the region because they have the tiebreaker with Lee Scott Academy. After Lee Scott Academy lost to Glenwood, Lee Scott just continues on winning. So Glenwood knows that Lee Scott is right behind them in the standings. But really, in all aspects of the game, talking with Coach Nelson at the Glenwood Gators Coaches Show on Tuesday, talking about just the preparation, getting up for a road opponent. I mean, it's not easy to travel 3 hours to go face a road opponent, but they were able to dominate. Dallas Crow, he has been sensational. And you talked about Camden White. He is the ultimate two-way player. Not only is one of their top receivers, also one of their top defensive backs. And you can't say enough about the sophomore running back Carter Judah And then on the other side of the ball, Lamont Burton, the leading tackler on the team. And Glenwood, we could talk about that game coming up. I mean, they do have some very key games, but Chambers Academy, that's a non-region game. I know we're looking ahead, but that's their last game of the season. And that could be a really big test to get them prepared for the playoffs, even though they won't face Chambers in the playoffs because they are a lower classification.
You're exactly right. All right, we're going to touch on these quickly because they're blowouts. I'm just going to throw them up there, and we can, alternate between the games, Richard. First, I'll go with Central. They took on Dothan. Dothan was 5-1. Dothan ranked a really good football team. And I know you were talking with our good friend Philip Jordan, and Central is just on another level right now, and that includes Thompson. I think the way Andrew Alford, he's just taken that quarterback play to a whole nother level. We know about the playmakers on the outside. The defense is just ball hawking all over the place, but they don't play games with anyone. They get out to early dominating leads, and then they just put that boa constrictor hold on them and suffocate the life out of all their opponents. And they've done that every game. It would be a Central thing, and I love my Central fans out there. And I love Central football, but we've seen dominant Central teams in the past that have come up short against teams that they're way more talented than. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think this is definitely Coach Patrick Nick's best team since being at Central. And the way they're playing right now, I don't see anybody, including Thompson, slowing them down at all. I know they got a freshman quarterback that was great last year in the state championship game against Central, but I think that they're going to hold on and continue this dominant stretch. They still got to play Auburn. That's going to be huge, and that's going to be at Auburn. But that's a couple weeks down the road. But Central, another dominating win against Dothan. Any quick thoughts on that, Richard? Then move on. You can do the next game.
Yes, because I keep, picking against Central. No, actually, for high school game day, I said the game would be close. So I whiffed on this one once again. But Thrift,
when are you going to be a believer, Richard?
I am a believer in Central. But remember, Dothan was up 7-0 in this game. But Central just put the clamps on that Dothan Wolves offense. They're like a boa constrictor. I mean, they will just squeeze the life out of you, and they just
it's not how you start, Rich. It's how you finish.
It's how you finish. And when you have depth on the Central Red Devils team, that's how you're able to dominate games. And Andrew Alford, as a junior, remember, he's only a junior. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the state of Alabama.
Yeah. And Percy Julian, they got coming up next. I think they're going to dominate that game. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then they have Auburn next week, Friday night at Duckworth Stadium. That is in Auburn, and they end it with Prattville. So Central looking to go undefeated in the regular season. A couple other games you can just throw up there. Auburn beat Opelika in that rivalry game. Remember, those two schools are about 10 minutes apart. And Auburn won a thriller 31-30. I watched that game on Opelika's broadcast page. Shout out to Van Riggs. That was a really good game, Richard.
Yeah, they came back from 13 down to win that with a go-ahead touchdown with the closing seconds in that game. And I know Opelika wanted to get that win because they haven't beat Auburn since 2019. And to be there in front of the fans, I thought this was the Opelika team to do it, to finally beat their rival, because they have Roman Gagliano, a 3-year starter. Jamar Miller, great wide receiver. Coach Eric Speakman is a very good coach. And Opelika has been battle-tested, having losses to Thompson, Central, Theodore. I felt that they could come out and win this game. Thrift, you and I both picked Opelika at high school game day. We were close.
Yeah.
We were scoreboard watching. I mean, I was looking down at the score. They were up 16-7. I mean, they had a 13-point lead, and then Auburn, all of a sudden, they steal the victory. And what a great win for Auburn, Coach Etheridge, and that team to go into Bulldog Stadium and get the 1-point victory.
Columbus got dominated by Daughtery 33-0. Cairo beat Hardaway 49-6. And those are some of the other scores. Lee Scott, a school right up the street from us, that is Glenwood's rival. They beat Bessemer, so they stay one game behind Glenwood as the number 2 overall seed. that's going to head into the 3A AISA playoffs. And Lanier beats Russell County, who had a lead the entire game.
Oh, boy.
And just lost a heartbreaker. And now Russell County goes to 0-7 on the season.
Yeah, and Russell County could have had at least 3 of those games could have been wins.
One of them against Harris County. You see how good they are in the second week of the season. Could have upset Valley. Could have beat Lanier. They really could have. They could be 4-3 right now, 3-4. But a couple bad bounces, and then just nothing can go right this year for this Russell County team. But I believe in Dylan Griggs. They're a young
I do too.
team. Remember, he talked about this. He doesn't have a lot of seniors that are playing. So next year, look at Russell County as being the Harris County of this year as one of the most improved teams. All right, let's do quickly rapid fire, Rich, previewing these upcoming games, and then we'll talk some college football and NFL and get out of here. We'll start where we're going to be. High school game day, which is Glenwood, number 1 Glenwood, taking on number 8 Autauga Academy, 5-2 on the season, and one of those losses was Lee Scott. They're ranked in the top 10 in the state rankings, number 8, and Glenwood undefeated. We will be there for high school game day. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to be there. As always, we'll have Dusty Perdue as a guest picker. We're going to have the headmaster, Mr. Davison. He's going to come and talk with us in his first year at the lead man of the Glenwood Gators. And then, of course, Tim Fanning. So it'll be all things Glenwood. And then, Richard, you'll leave. I'll stay there to call the game with Rick Beach. You're going to leave, and you're going to head over to Smith Station as you're going to see those Opelika Bulldogs we were just talking about taking on a Smith Station that's had kind of like Russell County, just not a great season. Nothing's gone right for them. A lot of injuries, and you'll be there with Michael Long Jr. So excited about those 2 games. We'll start with Opelika Smith Station. Smith Station they're playing for pride at this point, trying to, be competitive against these rivals. But I expect Opelika to manhandle them, especially after last week. They're mad. They're angry. They felt like they were in the game against Central, 10 points. That's the closest Central game that they've had all season long, and they could have beat Auburn. So they're 3-4, easily could be 5-2, 6-1, heck, maybe even undefeated. I think they're gonna take care of business against Smith Station.
Smith Station is rebuilding. With first-year head coach Bryant Harrison, there is one bright spot. Their leading rusher, Cameron Parks, he's a really good running back. But the last time I was at TC Britton Field at Panther Stadium, which, by the way, Smith Station has a great fan base. Bill Bailey does their play-by-play for Panther Radio. And I was there last year calling the game where Smith Station upset Prattville. That was such a big win that their head coach, Mike Glisson, he was interviewed by Kevin Roble on WRBL, and he got emotional. He broke down because he knew how important that was for the fans and for the players because they have not beaten Prattville in a long time. Folks, those who watch Smith Station and they support them, their time is coming because I do feel that Smith Station has the resources. They have the right coach. They just got to get the players to want to commit to being a Panther because you look at all these schools, Central, Glenwood, Smith Station, they're all in close proximity. Opelika is in pretty good close proximity. They're in Lee County. They're up the road on Highway 431.
Yeah.
We just got to get the talent to Smith Station because I do feel that the fan base and the support for Smith Station is there. I'm looking forward to calling this game, and hopefully Smith Station can pick up their first win of the season. If not Friday, they play winless Jag the following week, and then Percy Julian, I expect them to at least get 1 win, or if not 2, against those 2 opponents in their region.
Well, hopefully so. I know you're going to be on the call. It's going to be hopefully a competitive game. Smith Station's had good teams in recent years. It's not like they've been a morbid program for 15 seasons. They've had competitive teams that made playoff runs that even came close to upsetting Central. I remember 8 years ago, they actually beat Central, maybe less than that. And then the basketball program as well made a state championship run a few years ago.
Baseball team won. Oh, I was just going to say, baseball team won a state championship in 2015.
And there we go. And then they played Central for the semifinal game that was huge last year. I know everybody remembers that.
I was at that game. That was incredible.
We actually wanted to try to do the play-by-play for that. It was such a big-time game. All right, Glenwood and Autauga. I expect Glenwood. Autauga's competitive, but being at home, Glenwood should take care of business and should dominate this game. We'll talk more about it on high school game day. Richard, go ahead and put up a few other games on the slate, including Carver going up to Chris County. It's a big one. Carver getting a big win against Thomasville. They want to get back on the right track, but Chris County is a team that is going to be competitive. They're going to make noise in the playoffs this year. Give me your thoughts on that game, Richard.
Well, it's going to be in Cordele. And for those of you who don't know about Cordele, Georgia, it's a very small town just north of Tifton, just right outside when you're going down I-75 towards Valdosta. The whole town will show up for this game. They love their Crisp County Tigers. They are a passionate fan base. And the state of Georgia has circled this game because they know how good the Carver Tigers are out of Columbus, and they are live streaming this game on one of those live streaming services that covers just regional coverage in the state of Georgia. And this is a big region game. Crisp County is one of the top teams in the region. I feel if Carver can get over the hump and get this win against Crisp County, then I feel that the Carver Tigers can win this region.
I think so too. And Crisp, by the way, they're 4-3, Richard, on the season this year. And Crisp is 1-1 in region play. Thomasville 1-1, and Carver is 2-0. So if Carver is able to win this game, they'll pretty much solidify and clinch the region, in my opinion. Carver is 4-3 on the season. They said Crisp County lost to Monroe last week, by the way, 21-16. So that's one of their losses. Carver, I think that, like I said, getting that win over Thomasville is a big win for them. And I like what this Carver team has got coming up. I'm looking at their next couple of games. They're 4-3 right now. And that big win over Thomasville, beat Columbus, Hateville Charter, Brookwood, and Northeast. All those close games, to lose them, it's going to get them prepared. I think they beat Crisp County. They'll beat Monroe and Daugherty to end the season 7-3. I like the way Carver's playing. Big game coming up against Crisp County. We'll be talking about that on high school game day. We won't pick the game yet, but I think if Matthew Mungan, if they can get out and play that smash mouth football that Carver likes to do, running first and then being able to pass second, they'll be competitive.
Thrift, Carver made it to the quarterfinals last year as a number 2 seed. In fact, they were hosting a game at Otis Spencer Stadium against Oconee County, a team they should have won. I mean, that they could have at least been in the semifinals. Imagine if they get a number 1 seed and they're guaranteed to host 2 playoff games. And with the GHSA coin flip, they might even be able to host 3 playoff games. I think Carver can go further than where they went last year. So they're still a young team. They got everything to play for. Getting the win over Thomasville was huge. Now they got to get that win against Crisp County and go win this region.
Big win again for Carver as they beat Thomasville, and they got a big one against Crisp County. Let's put up a few more, Richard, so we can touch on some college football. Another big game is Northside against Northgate. Northgate beat McIntosh, who's 5-1. And I thought between McIntosh and Harris County could be playing for a region championship if they both won last Friday. Well, Harris County won. By the way, that game is the last game of the season for Harris County, their senior night. Northgate went on the road to McIntosh and beat them by 29. Northside, this is going to be a tough one, especially losing to your rival at home in Harris County. Northgate, a lot of momentum. They're riding high after that dominant win over McIntosh last week. And if they do beat Northside, they're setting up a mega matchup against Harris County for that region championship next week. Northside against Northgate. Richard, Caden Clay's got to be fantastic. They got to get the ball out quick, and they got to manage to have a decent running game. Last week's the running game was not there. And then when they got down by 2 scores, they had to rely a lot on Caden Clay. And then, he had a couple turnovers, but when they're efficient, like what we saw against Shaw, and they're able to have a great running game that is matched with the passing game and they go side by side, that's when you see that Northside offense clicking on all cylinders.
Well, these two teams finished 1-2 last year, and Northside won the region. Northgate finished in second. Northgate's having a great season. They are improved. That's a 5A school out of Noonan, Georgia. And you look at the styles. Northside, yes, they are missing out on Malachi Hosley, by the way, just won Offensive Player of the Week for the Ivy League schools. He had 2 rushing touchdowns for Penn. But Kingston Rivers, Jay Jackson, they're carrying the load. And they're doing a great job. And you got to look at the small sample size for Northside. They lost to a team in Harris County that is on a mission. They are playing on another level. Northside should be able to bounce back and get the win, even though they're going up to Noonan. But I think that Northside is still a good football team that has everything in front of them. And even though Harris County has the tiebreaker, this could be a very important game when it comes to the seedings, because all 4 teams are going to make the playoffs: McIntosh, Northgate, Harris County, and Northside. But they still got to play McIntosh as well. So they really can control their destiny, and they just got to hope that Harris County loses to one of them and they could still win the region. But right now, the focus is on beating Northgate.
Yeah, it is. And so we're going to be cheering for Northside, but it's going to be a tough task. Couple other games, Richard, you can throw up real quickly. Calvary takes on Kings Academy. Calvary, big win last week, 4-3 now. But this is going to be a test on the road. If they're able to win this, I like Calvary Christian winning out, going 7-3, and being a top team in gaps to maybe win a championship this year.
It would be the first championship for Calvary since 2020, and how fitting would that be? So far, they are 4-0 against teams in the gaps. I'm not worried about teams in the GIAA or the GHSA. Yes, they're 0-3 against those teams, but they are competing against teams in the gaps, and they have dominated just about everybody. Opening week, they made a statement when they upset Cherokee Christian, the defending gaps champions. And the Kings Academy out of Woodstock, Georgia. This is the rematch of the baseball championship. The Kings Academy is not too bad in football either.
No, they aren't. And you know, we saw them play in the baseball state championship last year. So, you know, this is a little bit of a rivalry, and they want to take revenge for the dominate performance Calvary put on them last year. So excited is an understatement. Pacelli, they take on Strong Rock Christian, who is 6-1, by the way. This is a game that I thought with Strong Rock, who went 3-7 last year, would be like it's a tune-up game after playing Brookstone. No, Strong Rock Christian's top 10 team, and they have a better, I don't know if they beat Stratford yet this year, but they are vying with Pacelli for a region championship and being the number 1 seed in the GIAA. I mean, this is a big game, and it's going to be on Viking Live, so you can watch it. It's senior night for the Pacelli Vikings. They have their final 2 games. The last 2 games are on the road, but Strong Rock Christian is a very formidable opponent and a team that is much improved from last year. It's going to be a big one.
And hopefully they can get that momentum, getting a dramatic win over their rival in the battle for the Brucelli Jug, and that could carry over to getting a win over Strong Rock Christian. Both teams 6-1. Dimel Field is going to be rocking. That game day experience on the campus of Pacelli, you can't beat it. We were there for homecoming when they were taking on Gatewood, and Dave Plata and whoever he had, maybe DJ Jones will call with them again. I really love that tandem. I love listening to both of them, and I love what they do. Jeremy Hayes, Drew Plata for Viking Live. They have such a great production, and we love our Pacelli Vikings, and we hope that they can get the win and carry this momentum going to 7 straight wins, and that is really going to give them momentum going into the GIAA playoffs.
Yeah, their only loss this season has been to Whitfield Academy, who is 2-5 on the year, but they are a public school, and their 2 wins are against private schools in Strong Rock Christian and Brookstone. So Strong Rock 6-1. They beat a team out of Perry Westfield, who's another team that's in Pacelli's region. Pacelli will play them here in a few weeks, but 6-1. They've won 5 straight games, and they come in as a team that I think could give Pacelli fits, especially after that game coming off high emotion in Brookstone. You don't want that to be a carryover, and then you take this team too lightly, and they come into your house and upset you. So we'll see. But the Patriots from Strong Rock, 6-1, top 10 team, another top 10 team because they played Brookstone top 10, Gatewood top 10, Stratford top 10. Glenwood top 10. Pacelli's had a strong schedule this year, and they got another big game against GIAA opponent, Strong Rock Christian. All right, let's talk some college football, Richard, and we'll hit on all those games and pick those games. Central plays Percy Julian, by the way, on Saturday. You don't have to put that up. That's going to be a dominant game. Percy Julian 500. We'll pick that on high school game day. That will be Friday, live from Glenwood. Let's talk some college football. Auburn was on a bye. They faced LSU. But the Bulldogs taking on Kentucky, who many thought were going to be maybe the team that could, give Georgia a run for their money in the East. Georgia obliterated them. Got off to a hot start, won 51-13. Carson Beck looked every bit as the 5-star that people thought he would be when coming in that recruiting class a few seasons ago. Kirby Smart's team, it takes them about week 5, week 6, week 7 for they start hitting on all cylinders. They just took Kentucky to the woodshed, and I don't see anybody in the East, even Tennessee, who Georgia has to play on the road. I don't see anybody really giving Georgia fits. It'll be a hostile environment. It will be a tough game, but no one's going to be able to match what Georgia can put on the field. Big win for them as they take care of business against the Wildcats.
I made a mistake on my show earlier. I said that Georgia was on upset alert, and I don't even know why I said that. They completely dominated Kentucky. You look at what Kentucky did against Florida. Ray Davis had 250 yards, and I thought that Kentucky would hang with Georgia because of the running game. Georgia couldn't stop the run game against Auburn the week before, but this is what great teams do. They make adjustments, and Kirby Smart knew that this is an SEC East team. And I don't know if Kentucky was talking trash. I know Mark Stoops got on and said, well, NIL, is getting rid of the depth. And, if we had the players that they had, we would have competed. And Georgia made a statement to say, hey, we are still the top dog, no pun intended, in the SEC East. And they completely obliterated Kentucky from start to finish. And Ray Davis was only held to 50 yards rushing. Statement win. The Georgia Bulldogs are back, and I think they're going to obliterate Vanderbilt. 12 o'clock kickoff. It's pretty much Sanford Stadium North because it's going to have more Georgia fans than Vanderbilt fans. I can guarantee you that. And then they get a bye, and then, the Florida game is always tricky, but that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah. Georgia I think Georgia's on the pathway to go to the SEC championship once again. Who knows who they're going to play? Maybe Alabama. Maybe
I think we know after what happened this Saturday as Alabama takes care of business against Texas A&M. And I thought what I saw from Texas A&M, I mean, just so much talent with all the 5-stars that Jimbo Fisher has accumulated over recent years. And to have a 7-point lead at halftime, to end up losing that game the way they did 24-17 and that Alabama defense not giving up any points in the second half. Jalen Milroe had his best game as a collegiate athletic, as a college athlete and as a quarterback. And I liked what I saw from Alabama. And then if you look at their schedule, they play Tennessee and LSU. Both of them are at home. I know they are at Auburn, but that's going to be a tough game against Auburn, Rich. But I think this Alabama team, they proved, and Josh Pate on late kick with Josh Pate, he said it. If they beat A&M, they're going to win out, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing from this Alabama team. They're starting to find their identity. They were able to run the ball with Jace McClellan, but it's the defense that I was really impressed with, and Alabama's schedule shaped up as it could be another Bulldogs and Tide SEC championship game in December.
Wouldn't that be something if we got to see Georgia and Alabama once again? We've already seen it twice for the national championship, and we've seen it 3 times for the SEC championship, once in 2012 and then just recently 2018 and then 2021. It seems like Georgia and Alabama, that's the way that the SEC championship should always be meant to play, because these two teams are very similar. Kirby Smart has been compared to Nick Saban in his earlier coaching days. And I think that Alabama is back to the level that Nick Saban had them in the early 2010s, where their focal point was their defense, and they had the running game, and the quarterback was still good. But, Alabama's been spoiled. Look at all those quarterbacks that have been put in the NFL. Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, Bryce Young. That doesn't necessarily mean that Jalen Milroe is not at their level. He made a couple of great throws in that Texas A&M game to Jermaine Burton. I mean, you look at what Alabama did against Texas A&M. I think that Alabama is back. Well, they never left, but the people that thought that Alabama was going to get losses to Texas A&M or Ole Miss, Alabama proved why they are still one of the top teams in the SEC.
Alabama faces off against this week. It's not Mississippi State.
Oh, Arkansas,
excuse me. And that's 12 o'clock kickoff. Then Vanderbilt takes on Georgia, 12 o'clock kickoff. And then Auburn goes to Baton Rouge. I think a bye is going to get this Auburn. They saw some things, because remember the last game was against Georgia. And I think they saw some things in that game that they think that they can build off of. But Jaden Daniels is just on another level right now. And LSU, as bad as their defense is, in a night game in Baton Rouge, I just don't think it's favorable for Auburn. I think Auburn ends up getting dominated there. By the way, Rich, just want to throw this out there real quickly. You also said Alabama could go 6-6 after that South Florida game, which they looked terrible against South Florida. That was more worrisome than losing to Texas. But heck, this is why you don't have those hot takes, because you never know what's going to happen. By the way, speaking of Texas,
I take it back.
Yeah, and they had a close loss to Oklahoma. But I think those two teams, Texas is far from out of the playoff, being out of the playoff discussion. Even if Oklahoma goes undefeated, which if you look at their schedule, it's very favorable. I think that Texas and Oklahoma play again in the Big 12 championship, and I don't think Oklahoma has the firepower to beat Texas twice, because a lot of Texas, wounds were self-inflicted in that game. Ohio State had a big win. There's a lot of big games this weekend. We'll learn more about Oregon and Washington, as Oregon has dominated every opponent that's been in front of them. Washington, same thing. Those are two of the top teams in the Pac-12. I don't put USC in there because I think USC is just one Caleb Williams injury away from their season being derailed. And I understand if any other team loses their starting quarterback, it would hurt them. But USC cannot rely on anything else other than Caleb Williams. They can't. If Caleb Williams having a bad game, which he was against Arizona, they still needed him to carry them at the end of the game to win by 2 points. I'm not a big believer in USC, but I didn't really want to hit on this. I'm just going to give my Miami game and Mario Cristobal was a disgrace to coaching. But I'm not going to fire him, because obviously he's got a Miami in a position talent-wise in which they have not been in a long time. But I wouldn't be able to look my players in the eye after knowing all I had to do was just kneel, be undefeated, and have still a big game against North Carolina. Their season's not done. If they win out and win the ACC, that means they would beat Florida State. Miami will make the playoffs this year. But to lose to a Georgia Tech team who is not good at all, and to see it to play out the way it did, I mean, mind-boggling is a word I like using. But Richard, any quick thoughts on that before we move on to NFL and we get out of here?
Oh, absolutely. Georgia Tech is the luckiest team in college football. That was a win by Georgia Tech that they did not deserve. And remember, they lost to Bowling Green the week before. Miami just completely blew this game. All Coach Cristobal had to do was take a knee. Now, I can understand. I try to relive this play. It looked like the play clock was winding down. So even if you take a knee, it's fourth down. Georgia Tech's out of timeouts. I think you let the play clock run down even when you try to punt the football away. So it made no sense to run the football there. And just a freakish play was a fumble with 23 seconds left to go. And still, Georgia Tech just throws up a prayer.
But
Haynes King.
I think that's the thing too, Richard, that people forget. They harp on he should have kneeled it, but Georgia Tech still had to drive 70 yards down the field.
Exactly.
In 30 seconds. And then that pass to have it, a mistake play and just I would say an airhead mistake from the secondary, just losing focus on what was happening there to give up a touchdown like that is definitely mind-boggling. All right, real quickly, Falcons get a big win. They're going to 3-2 on the season. They beat the Houston Texans. Shout out to Rex Castillo. I was watching the game with him, and Falcons could have put the game away before Houston ended up taking the lead. They were up at that time 15-13. 15-12.
Right.
And they would have scored a touchdown to make it a 10-point game. Game's over with. But they get stopped. They go up by 6. Houston, course, goes down, scores a touchdown, takes the lead by 1, and then Younghoe Koo does Younghoe Koo things and kicks the game-winning field goal. We were watching it, and we were doing the CB Hoops Practice Fall League. And big win for them. They got another big game against Commanders. I think they're going to dominate Commanders, especially after they got beat by the putrid Chicago Bears. Falcons 4-2 after this week. And then they got the Buccaneers. That's a big one on the road. The Bucs could be 3. They're 3-1 now. They had a bye. They could be 3-2, depending on if they get a win this week. And I think the Buccaneers, I don't know who they play. I know they play a team that they probably
they play the Lions.
Yeah, the Lions, by the way. And they play at Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay could win that. I like the Lions. They're 4-1. I think they're playing really good football aside from the Eagles and the 49ers. I think they're the third best team in the NFC. But the Falcons, they still got a lot to play for. The division's up for grabs. I know they look terrible across the pond against Jacksonville. They look terrible on the road against Detroit. But at home, they go 8-0 at home, get 1 or 2 wins on the road. They could make the playoffs this year. And big win for the Atlanta Falcons. And big win for your 49ers, who literally made America's team not America's team anymore. And they haven't been for a long time in the Cowboys. But to win 42-10, I mean, they're going to be starting conversations now. Does San Francisco go undefeated this year? Because I'm not seeing any weaknesses. Brock Purdy's been great. Christian McCaffrey's the best running back in football right now. You got 2 number 1 receivers in Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. The defense, you can't even run on them. You can't pass on them. You can't literally do anything offensively. I like the San Francisco team, and that juggernaut game coming up in 5 weeks against the Eagles. Both those teams could be undefeated. We could have 2 teams with 10-0 records facing off deep in the NFL season. That'd be the first time it's ever happened.
Well, Thrift, as a 49ers fan, I dissect this team. I try to find out what the weaknesses are. I think they have 2 weaknesses that might get exposed. The right tackle, Colton McKivitz, he's not Mike McGlinchey. I mean, he's okay. I mean, he's getting the job done. Really, I don't know why the Cowboys didn't put Micah Parsons over there, but it's neither here or there. And then their cornerbacks are not Pro Bowl cornerbacks. If you get an elite quarterback, all he has to do is get the ball out quick, because that pass rush, they could rush with 4 and just throw bombs and hope that the receiver gets down with it and the 49ers secondary doesn't get called for pass interference. That's the only weakness, I think. They have weapons so they can outscore you. Like week 2 against the Rams, Matthew Stafford was just throwing it to Puka Nacua, which, by the way, has been a fantastic rookie. Matthew Stafford was hot in week 2 against the 49ers, but Brock Purdy just kept matching them score for score. And when you have Christian McCaffrey on your team, they're undefeated with Christian McCaffrey. Just to touch up on the Falcons, Thrift, I actually thought that their defense kept them in that game, holding the Texans to 4 field goals. I think that was important. And they added a new weapon that probably is going to play on Sunday against the Commanders. Van Jefferson. I can't believe the Rams just gave him up.
Yeah, unbelievable. And that's he had 800 yards 2 seasons ago when the Rams
exactly.
Super Bowl in 2021. We got a big week coming up this week. High School Game Day is going to be live from Glenwood. Richard, you'll be on the call for Smith Station Opelika. I'll do Glenwood, talking with Rick Beach. Michael Long will be joining you Sunday, got a great thing going on. CBU's Practice Fall League semifinals are the first 2 games. We got Auburn High School taking on Carver. That's going to be great. The Carver basketball team is really good, and Tony Montgomery, who was out last week, supposed to be back. I can't wait for that matchup. Adam Gonya, Bradley Pearson, and the Auburn Tigers, Tabari Allen, they're loaded. They're going to be a really good team. Central takes on Pacelli. I mean, we got great semifinals, and then we got a potential championship that's going to be one of the best fall league championships later on that day, plus 3 other consolation games, all on Georgia Alabama Sports Live, starting at 3:30. So we're excited to be there for it. Next week, we'll be at Happy Hour Bar and Grill. Thank you to Matt Call, Dave. We'll be back next Tuesday. We'll have great guests. We'll have some great coaches that are come on, and we'll preview all the stuff like we normally do on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show. From Thrift, Barringer, and Richard Holdridge, we've had a lot of fun with you today. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for what you do. If you want to be a sponsor for all the stuff that we got going on for Georgia Alabama Sports Live, and as we continue to grow, you can be a part of that right now by DMing us or contacting myself on Thrift Barringer page or Richard Holdridge. Can't wait for another great weekend of football, college, pro, all of it. And then we got the Sports Vision radio show with myself and DJ Jones. You see Sports Vision's behind me. I'll be back in this studio tomorrow from 4 to 6 p.m. talking all things sports related and local, regional, national on the #1 sports talk radio show around, Sports Vision radio show 92.1 Smooth R&B. Thank y'all so much. From Richard, I'm Thrift. Have a great night, and we will see you Friday from Glenwood. And then, of course, the doubleheader, Glenwood and Autauga top 10 matchup, Smith Station, Opelika. Have a great night. Thank you.